The story began with an exploration of the concept of ranking, a system that determines a person's status in life. It's the same thing that ignites inner desires and pushes you to seek self-actualization. This ranking manifests itself in power and intelligence, as well as in social connections, wealth, and even your choice of classes. In an era like this, everything is evaluated according to a hierarchy of values. At the same time, the young lad's journey was just beginning. He stood looking ahead, contemplating the path ahead of him. In a quiet village called Tuli, where life was lived simply, a fellow named Lo was chopping wood, and his every stroke showed diligence. On his face he read satisfaction after work, his age 16. At that moment, one of his fellow villagers called out to him, asking him to sharpen his sword. Suddenly, an enraged girl named Yuna flew in, kicking the man and yelling at him not to ask Lo to do everything for him. Yuna, also 16 years old, showed determination and firmness of character. She said Lo has always seemed distracted since he was a kid, and that doesn't mean he's a slacker. But Yuna didn't stop there. She grabbed Lo and shook him, clearly resenting the other's unceremonious use of him, though Lo himself didn't react in any way. Then in a calmer tone she said she understood, Lo was just being overly kind. But suddenly an idea popped into her head and Yuna smiled brightly. She approached Lo and he whispered excitedly, asking if he wanted to leave the village for a while, because she found a secret path that no one knows about. Before they could decide, Yanina's grandmother appeared. She forbade them to leave the village, citing ancient rules. Yuna tried to persuade her, but the old woman did not agree, sharply pushing her granddaughter away with a stick. Then a couple of men intervened and Nana demanded that Yuna be locked up because of her behavior. In stark contrast, the other fat man asked Lo to bring water later, and Lo calmly agreed. The man pointed out how different Lo and Yuna were, even though they were almost the same age and were the only young ones in the village. Afterward, he told Lo to get some rest. Surely he would have things he wanted to do for himself. But Lo politely declined, insisting on helping, which surprised the man. Lo's mind flashed back to how the residents had welcomed him after his parents died, becoming a real family to him. He remembered how everyone treated him warmly, like he was one of them. They tried to make sure he wasn't lonely. In return, he quietly decided to repay that kindness with gratitude. Smiling to himself, Lo thought about how much he loved the village and all its inhabitants. The man, touched by Lo's words, invited him to move in with him starting today. But Lo politely declined, explaining that he was still living in the house left behind by his parents. In the end, Lo once again convinced himself that the people in the village meant a great deal to him. Meanwhile, Yuna sat locked up in a wooden cage in the village square, longing for the outside world. She was calling loudly to her grandmother, demanding to be let out. But the old woman only looked at her with irritation, lamenting her granddaughter's stubbornness and wishing she were calmer like Lo. When Yuna tried to understand why her grandmother wouldn't let her out of the village, the old woman replied that there was no need, merchants would drop by from time to time. But Yuna objected, explaining that it wasn't about needs. It was about her desire to explore the vast world beyond, about why they should remain imprisoned. With a serious look, Grandma revealed that someone out there hated them. Yuna asked, stunned, wondering who it could be. But Grandma brushed it off, saying she shouldn't know that. In time, it will all become clear. Meanwhile, Lo drew water from the well, working concentratedly and without haste. Once the deed was done, he looked around to make sure everything was okay. But then some kind of rock hit him in the back of the head. He turned around and saw Yuna hiding behind him. She smiled mischievously and gestured an invitation to be quiet and follow her. Lo was surprised to see her on the loose again, but Yuna proudly stated that she had escaped many times before. She eagerly motioned for him to follow her, though Lo hesitated and remained silent. When they got beyond the village boundaries, Lo expressed concern that grandmother would scold them both if she found out. But Yuna assured him that everything would be fine, especially since they wouldn't be gone for long. She added that she wanted to show him something special. The suggestion made Lo embarrassed. They advanced through the lush green forest, Yuna walking forward excitedly and Luo cautiously following behind her. When they were almost out of the woods, Yuna's excitement grew. She told Lo that they were close to where she had been before. Walking side by side, Lo looked at his surroundings with wonder. At last they came to an expanse where before them stretched a majestic valley as far as the horizon. Yuna exclaimed with delight, pointing at the breathtaking scenery and marveling at the scale and beauty of the outside world. Lo was touched. It was the first time he had seen such a sight, and, overwhelmed with emotion, he could not refrain from exclaiming how incredible it was. Turning to him with a serious expression, Yuna asked if he knew the rules of the outside world. The question awakened his curiosity and confusion. She then pulled out a secret book she had bought from a merchant, explaining that it described the system applied in the outside world, ranks. Yuna continued by telling me that this system covers almost everything. Adventurers, healers, even musicians are all categorized by rank. Those who reach the ranks are called rankers, and the classification is based on strength, food, wealth, and even weapons. She spoke passionately, emphasizing that the outside world lives in a world of power. It's a real race to rise in rank. Lo was amazed, gradually realizing that the external rules were completely different from what he was used to. Meanwhile, Yuna was proclaiming her dream of becoming a ranked adventurer. She said she wants to travel far, face challenges, meet rivals, and eventually become a badass adventurer. Lo earnestly reminded her of the prohibition against leaving the village. But she interrupted him, full of energy, saying she didn't care about inhibitions. Her decision was final. Then she held out her hand to him, inviting him to go together. With a wide smile and a shout of joy, she announced that she wanted them to embark on an adventure together. Lo looked at her with a skeptical expression on his face. At that moment, she remembered a dangerous childhood moment when she was attacked by a huge monster when she was 5 years old. And she got really scared. She remembered how Lo had bravely saved her by meeting the bird with a sudden and an unexplained burst of power. Lo was confused by the story and asked if it really happened. Yuna confirmed enthusiastically and noted that something strange had come out of him then. She continued that she's since realized, though Lo is usually calm, but when he's serious, he's the strongest. With a smile, she said he would shine even brighter in the outside world, and enthusiastically invited him to join the adventure. She said he would make a great adventurer, and they will explore the outside world together. Lo was silent for a moment, then thanked Yuna softly. However, he confessed that despite everything, he loves his village and can't bring himself to leave it. Yuna became furious at his decision. She began to beat him in frustration, shouting her disagreement with his stubbornness. After announcing that she would be traveling alone, she turned around, shouting in anger and frustration that she would not look back again and would go her own way. Lo shouted to her to be careful on the road. Sitting in thought, he suddenly realized something he hadn't thought of before, that Yuna would indeed be leaving the village for good. He gazed lonely into the distant horizon while Yuna's words about the ranking system in the outside world echoed in his head. Time passed and the sunset began to color the sky with warm hues. And all the while he sat on the grass and looked up at the sky. Finally, toward evening, he decided to return to the village. He got to his feet and looked up at the sky in a strange way. In the clouds, something strange caught his attention. He turned around, surprised, and was shocked to see a huge object above him, ominous and out of place. Suddenly, that flying island began to glow with energy. A powerful beam erupted from this object, full of light and energy. So strong it knocked Lo to the ground. He tried to understand what was happening, but suddenly everything stopped. The mysterious object suddenly disappeared with astonishing speed, leaving Lo in fear and anxiety. He immediately ran back, eager to check everything. If Yuna, her grandmother, and the other residents are okay. On the run, he tried to convince himself that everything would be all right, that the village and its people were safe. But when he came to the place where the village was, all he saw was a huge crater in the middle of the forest, not a single living thing, and terror gripped him. He froze, stunned, staring into the void where the village once stood. There were no words to be found, and he began to go downstairs. Panic seized him, and he ran, shouting the names of Yuna, her grandmother, and anyone else who might be alive. But no one answered his call. In a moment of decadence and despair, the image of Yuna appeared in his mind. Her younger version, smiling, said that everything would be okay. Lo was drowning in painful memories, remembering the words of his fellow villagers that he was not alone, that they had since become his family. His eyes filled with tears. He cried out in pain and despair, kneeling before the destruction that had befallen his village. With an expression of shock and disbelief, he bitterly wondered why all this had happened to his house and people. Lo cried, blaming himself in deep remorse for not having done anything. Suddenly some guy showed up and said he was late again and just had to watch. He walked to the edge of the crater and spotted each other. Weeping Lo looked confusedly at the man who had suddenly appeared. Suddenly the stranger snapped out of his seat and jumped into the crater, running up to the boy. He calmly asked if Lo was a survivor of Tuli village. Lo answered in a quiet, sad voice, yes. The man expressed his condolences to Lo and the pain he is going through, and then reported that the island that had appeared earlier had disappeared. This surprised Lo, and he asked what the island was. He wondered about the nature of the mysterious object, who appeared and disappeared instantly and, seized with anger and tears, demanded an explanation of the fate of his fellow villagers and what had happened to them. The man gravely replied that Lo should forget about the village entirely, and handed him a small piece of paper indicating where he should go if he wanted to be safe. Lo became furious, grabbed the man by his clothes and demanded a clear answer. But the man exclaimed sharply that the village was gone forever and that this world was not for a guy like him. Then with a serious look he told Lo to forget all that had happened, because he had no other choice. He also thought to himself that Lo shouldn't dig into this any further or he himself would be the next victim. But Lo, deep down, refused to give up. And an echo of Yuna's words, Lo, when you're truly in tune, you're the strongest, came back to him in his mind. At that moment, he felt a strange power awaken in him. The man turned to the boy in shock, and decided with anger and determination that he would never forget what had happened, and vows to go to that island and bring back all the inhabitants, whatever it takes. Lo's thoughts drifted back to childhood memories of that day, when he lost his parents in a landslide. He recalled bitterly the days after that tragedy when he found himself alone. But something changed one of those days. The village and its people sheltered him and cared for him as if he were their own son. Lo began to recreate images of Yuna, reminiscing how she was always there with a bouquet of flowers and an innocent smile. Memories of the villagers came flooding back to him, kind people who couldn't get past someone else's misfortune. At the decisive moment, Lo realized that he could never forget these people, and the mysterious energy of prana flowed out of him powerfully. The determination on Lo's face was clear. He was determined to go to that island at any cost and bring back everyone he had lost. The mysterious wanderer Lo encountered was shocked by the sheer volume of prana emanating from the guy. Strange shapes began to appear in front of the man. The space around Lo began to distort due to the power that surrounded him. At that moment, Lo remembered the definition of prana from a book he had read. It is the mental energy inherent in all living things. He also read that everyone has prana, but only a few are able to use it consciously. The especially gifted can intentionally channel this energy and empower it. Usually prana is invisible and colorless, but in the strong it shows up brightly and clearly. Lo also recalled that different races may have unique properties of prana. He introduced his fellow villagers and began to feel even more saddened by their passing. The traveler noted with concern that Lo was one of the few survivors from a place called Babel. And at first I wanted to protect him, but now I realized that he would soon free himself. The man thought regretfully that Lo had no idea how dangerous his situation was. At the same moment, he thrust his sword into the ground right in front of the guy. He then turned to Lo and said that if he truly wanted to get to the island, he would have to take up the sword and prove his strength. The man seriously added that once he saw enough potential in Lo, he would personally take on his training. Lo looked at him and drew his sword from the ground. The warrior bared a second sword blazing with red power and ordered Luo to fight to the death. A fierce battle ensued between the two. Luo stood shrouded in a mighty green prana while the man stood in a red aura of prana. Luo rushed forward, attacking with the power of his unique prana and full determination to fight. During the fight, the man noticed that Lo's swordsmanship was weak, but the power and pressure of his strikes were amazing. Despite the ineptitude, Lo's onslaught was unexpectedly crushing. As their blades clashed, they exchanged sharp glances that reflected the seriousness and strength of each. A wave of prana surged around Lo, startling the man and increasing his astonishment. Then he realized that Lo was truly exceptional, and he barely contained his admiration for the young man. Lo lunged forward even harder, his face burning with determination and anger as he continued to press relentlessly. After that powerful strike, an entire energy beam of prana was formed. After the fight was over, the man sat down next to Luo and said that the island that made the village disappear was called Heaven Island. He explained that the island usually floats above the ocean but sometimes suddenly appears in random places, destroying everything around it. The man expressed regret that he had tried many times to stop it, but again he was unable to prevent the destruction. He concluded by telling Lo about the theory that people surrounded by the light of the strange island are transported directly to Heaven Island. Lo wondered what would happen if he touched the mysterious light. The man calmly replied that it was only a theory. Then Lo asked what should he do. With a serious and deep look, the warrior said that Lo had to be in the top 10 in the adventure rankings to reach the island. Lo inquired about the nature of this ranking. The man explained that adventurers are professionals whose job it is to explore and develop undiscovered lands. He added that they make up the largest group among the classifications and those in the top 10 are equal in strength to the monsters. The man clarified that by reaching the top 10 adventurers, Lo would be able to enter Heavenly Island. The boy grabbed and squeezed his clothing tightly. He warned that the island has been at the top of the danger zone rankings since he first arrived and adventurers returning from there are a rarity. Afterward, the man asked Lo if he still wanted to go there. And Lo confirmed with unwavering determination that he would. The man stared at Lo for a long moment, pondering his answer. After a short pause, he said he would only train him for a year from now on, but only in swordsmanship. He suggested that Lo first train and then conquer the top of the rankings himself. The man introduced himself as Adel, the first most powerful knight among humans. Adel asked the young man his name, and he calmly replied Lo. Adel then shook his hand and seriously warned me that there would be no mercy in training. He smiled and acknowledged that Lo was the first man to hit him from the first punch. Lo looked at Adel with a hard stare, ready to be tested. Thus began a year of training that Lo himself later described as the year of hell. Lo trained with extreme intensity, and his hands and feet were covered with sores and blisters. My skin was tearing against the rocks. He also faced dangerous challenges where muscles were torn and bones were broken. Pain and suffering became such a frequent occurrence that blood was constantly flowing due to the rigors of the training. After all this torment, Adel suddenly stopped talking about the celestial island as if insinuating, look for answers yourself, and if you fail, accept it. Lo continued to fight and endure, believing that his fellow villagers were alive, and that belief propelled him forward. Many questions still haunted him. He kept thinking about why the village disappeared, and about what this mysterious island is all about. Lo stubbornly walked forward with his sword, assuring himself that he would get to the truth by moving up the ranks of adventurers. With indomitable determination, he promised himself again and again to reach the heights of the ratings to uncover all the mysteries of what had happened. It had been a full year since training had begun, and Lo was standing next to Adel at the top of the hill, admiring the view. Adel asked, looking at the horizon, if he was ready for the next journey. Lo replied confidently and calmly that he had been ready for a long time. He stared thoughtfully ahead, remembering Yuna's words about her dream of becoming a ranked adventurer, and invite him on your adventure. He also remembered that Yuna, dreaming of this world, had disappeared and realized that he was now going there in her place. Lo inwardly resolved to fulfill Yuna's dream and complete her journey for her. At this point, Adel called out to him, telling him that it was time to begin his journey and invited him to go forward. Lo calmly and confidently replied that he was ready to hit the road. After a year of grueling training, Lo had changed dramatically. He was now 17 and he had grown considerably during that time. Luo was indeed fully prepared to begin his journey to the Heavenly Island as an apprentice to the strongest knight of humanity. His journey began in the kingdom of Balther, more specifically in the village of Tuli, and headed for the royal capital of Traquista. There was an institution called the Bureau of Recognition in Traquist that kept and updated rankings of adventurers. In one of the offices, a girl was sleeping on a pile of scattered books and papers, mumbling in my sleep about onions and that it's time. The girl suddenly woke up in a panic, realizing that she had overslept and missed important business. She met a coworker who asked if she'd been sitting up all night looking at ratings lists. The girl excused herself that it's part of her job since she's a recognizer. A colleague advised her to conserve her health, given that her important job requires the constant evaluation of many people. It was explained that recognition management is a profession whose staff travels all over the world to fairly evaluate the skills of adventurers and assign them ranks, and that workers are taught this in a special way. The staff of the Office of Recognition must have extensive knowledge and high judgment and decision-making abilities. Also, to get a position that gives you the right to evaluate and rank others, had to go through a lot of checks and tests. Thus, it was considered one of the hardest jobs, and it was not for everyone. It was only available to a select few. The girl smilingly admitted to her colleague that she was just a junior employee and would have to work hard to earn a promotion. She laughed out loud, saying she wanted to do many things at once. A colleague suggested that the best way to get promoted was to become the personal agent of a prominent ranker. But the girl sadly replied that she had not yet found anyone worthy of her attention. The coworker laughed, noting that her demands were too high. But the girl said it's not her standards at all, it's that all the current rankers are morons. She passionately explained that competition among adventurers used to be fierce, and now the top rankings are stagnant, taking away valuable customers. The girl firmly stated that rankings are only valuable when they are constantly changing and evolving. The coworker smiled derisively, saying that the one was too caught up in grades and rankings, and the girl laughed. The authority girl is fired up about the idea that she wants a new star to emerge that will turn the ratings upside down. A coworker laughed as she opened the door and said the new star might be here. She then opened the door to a room full of people and declared that this rising star might already be here. The girl in the cap asked why there were so many applicants this year, and a coworker replied that there are usually far fewer. She added that the surge in interest may have been triggered by the 2-month shift of the Azaban Forest in the danger zone ranking, which attracted the attention of adventurers. Taking a closer look, a colleague noted that there were many promising candidates this year. She began to talk about one of the members, Old Darkus, at 753rd Mercenary, the young leader of the famous gang. She then pointed to a young man named Eddie Markman, the 402nd ranked shooter from a famous family of shooters. She continued that there are other outstanding professionals among the participants, such as Trade Ranker and others. Cap spotted a few more figures: a knight, a navigator, and a rancher guide. A colleague praised her for recognizing the ratings without prompting, to which the girl proudly replied that it was easy because she was a recognizer. Cap enthusiastically explained why people needed the rank of ranker so badly. It was very useful and necessary for access to some specialties. In the midst of their conversation, another colleague interrupted them. Asked to wait, registration procedures began. Lo entered the registration room and was warmly greeted by the receptionist, who said he was directed here to register for the rankings. The administrator explained the registration system. It is maintained by their office. And you can update your rating at any office with a representative, but you must register for the first time here. Lo told the administrator that he wanted to register as a ranger adventurer. She smiled and informed him that his timing was perfect, the exam was about to start, and offered to take it immediately. Lo agreed, filled out the registration form, and the receptionist informed him that the exam fee was 3,000 coins. Lo's has completed the registration process. The receptionist thanked him, asked him to wait in the next room, and gave him a participant number, 53. Cap noticed Lo walking by and exclaimed in amazement that there are still people who don't know what the Recognition Bureau is. The coworker laughed, saying she hadn't explained it to anyone in a long time. A coworker asked to help Gigi study for an exam, and she agreed, joking that the paperwork was better. The receptionist began to tell me the details of the exam. It would be in 3 stages. She explained that there will be a written test first, then a practical phase, and the final exam will be explained later. She advised the participants not to despair. If something fails at one stage, it can be compensated by success in the others. Participants immediately began the written exam, and some were clearly nervous and focused. One of the applicants thought to himself that the exam was incredibly difficult and covered too much. After a while, the administrator announced the completion of the written test. She said that the practical stage would take place in the forest outside the village in 2 hours, and we had to wait for the exam results. In the next room, the receptionist asked the luck girl to help her check the papers, and she enthusiastically replied that she was ready. In the office, 2 female staff members were busy checking exam forms. Checking out the works, the girl came across the sheet of contestant number 53, Lo, and immediately remembered him by the sad look she had seen before. But the look on her face changed from curiosity to utter shock. when she discovered that all of Lo's answers on the written exam were completely wrong. Frustrated, the young female staff members sighed and remarked that they needed to think about the feelings of those who were suddenly facing such a difficult ordeal. 2 hours later, the participants gathered in the forest for a practical examination where the administrator explained that they were to find certain treasures. She pointed to a large board with the value of each item and strictly forbade fights between the participants. Whoever took the item first was the item. The test subjects began bragging about skills and abilities. The administrator gave the start of the practical stage and the participants rushed into the forest. She breathed a sigh of relief when everyone left, saying she could take a little break now. She asked her colleague how many of them she thought would be able to pass on, and her colleague said about half. As the participants nimbly moved through the thicket, the receptionist asked if there was anyone particularly noteworthy among them. But my colleague sadly replied that she hadn't noticed anything outstanding so far. At that moment, old Darkus, who was the first to reach the gathering place, appeared and asked if he was the first to complete the task. Old Darkus presented a piece of precious royal ore which earned him 120 points in the exam. The administrator clarified if he was sure he wanted to complete the exam right away, and he indifferently replied that he would take it anyway. She tried to explain that more points would give him a higher ranking at registration. But he showed no interest, saying that his main occupation was mercenary and the ranking of adventurers didn't matter to him. Meanwhile, Eddie Markman quickly appeared with a rare bird feather and wondered who had gotten there before him. I already told him it's worth 180 points. Old Darkies began to taunt Eddie about the bird feather. But the man confidently replied that the feather belonged to a bird capable of flying silently at 500 kilometers per hour. They exchanged barbed remarks, while the receptionist noted with a smile that the rating system gives people a sense of pride. And a colleague confirmed that this is part of the strength of the participants. Suddenly everyone's attention was drawn to the loud approaching footsteps. The crowd stared in amazement as Lo came out of the woods dragging the carcass of a huge bear. Lo approached them, dragging the huge carcass behind him and throwing it on the ground. Calmly said he didn't know how to get the bile out of a bear, so he brought the carcass whole and asked if it would be accepted that way. The receptionist hesitated but said that in principle it was acceptable, as strange as it sounded. Lo got 300 points and everyone was amazed at how he killed a red bear on his own. The girl asked in surprise how he had managed to recognize such a rare animal if he had done so poorly on the written exam. And he simply replied that these bears often appeared near his village. The girl was puzzled by Lo's attitude, and another participant wondered aloud to a friend if he had seen that fight and how Lo had brought the carcass. He nervously said he had seen everything with his own eyes, but quickly dismissed it, saying he couldn't say for sure because it all happened too quickly. He remembered the moment when Lo Lightning grabbed his sword to stand up against the bear. In the blink of an eye, Lo defeated the bear with one punch, leaving everyone in shock. Meanwhile, Employee Luck watched Lo with a thoughtful, silent gaze full of amazement. An hour later, the participants gathered in an underground training room for the final phase of the exam. The staff member in charge began to explain that the adventurers' biggest fear was not only monsters but humans as well. She continued that the mission of adventurers is to explore new lands, often dangerous and uncharted. The girl added that such trips carry the risk of encountering pirates and bandits. Strength is needed. Accordingly, she announced that the final exam would be a practice battle between the participants. She assured that the test is only meant to assess their individual abilities, and there is no need to worry about winning or losing. At this time, one of the sturdy contestants approached Old Darkus and challenged him. The man began to taunt Old, saying that he only brought a stone with him on the practical stage and mocked the entire mercenary ranking. The large member became angry and pounced on Old with great force, stating that he would not allow his status to be insulted. But Ald easily knocked him down with a single punch, drawing admiration from everyone. Ald immediately apologized to the employee for his temper tantrum, and she said it was okay, because the defeated contestant is out anyway. Other participants spoke in amazement of Ald's strength, noting that anyone who tried to challenge him was rebuffed. The employee began to wonder who would be Ald's opponent, nervously asking herself. A younger co-worker approached a co-worker and said she wanted to pick a certain opponent for Lowe's, and the co-worker curiously agreed. The fights between the contestants began and the bouts were fierce, showcasing a variety of styles. It was the turn of the 8th battle, and the staffer announced that the next bout is the old darkies team versus Eddie Markman. Lo asked Dash, "Who's going to go up against him?" "Against the strongest competitor of number 53, Lo, alone?" Everyone was surprised by this decision, thinking they underestimated both of them. While Eddie noticed that this wasn't the first time he'd been underestimated. The employee nervously asked her colleague if she was sure of her choice, and the colleague confidently confirmed that she had done the right thing. The younger member of the Onion staff's eyes lit up with intense excitement if her eyes weren't deceiving her. Lo was not just an average contestant but a monster in every sense of the word. The bout began in the large arena and everyone in attendance watched eagerly. As the examiners prepared to do battle, 2 female employees of the bureau kept a close eye on the arena. On the other hand, Lo stood firmly and confidently in front of his 2 opponents, showing no fear or doubt. Meanwhile, Aldarkis, head of the Red Wolf mercenary group, prepared to fight alongside his partner Eddie Markman, a young man from a famous family of archers. They recalled the accomplishments of the Red Wolf squad, including defeating the Kama Mafia, ranked 62nd in the ranking of criminal organizations. There was also talk of Al himself single-handedly taking out 7 leaders of that group, including the boss. As for Eddie Markman, he was the scion of the Markman archery family and had an incredible talent for archery. From an early age, Eddie received special training from his father, who was once a second-ranked archer. Eddie's skills were well known among archers and no one doubted his marksmanship and skill. In this tough fight, Lo, the guy no one knew anything about, stood alone against 2 famous fighters. With great excitement, the staff member announced the start of the bout and each contestant rushed to their opponent. Eddie was the first to attack, firing a quick arrow in Lo's direction. But Lo skillfully dodged it. He then instantly moved towards Aldarkis, preparing to engage him in hand-to-hand combat. A fast and tense fight broke out between Lo and Al, both throwing hard punches. They exchanged swift attacks, and the sound of their swords clashing echoed through the arena, startling the spectators. The spectators were amazed at the speed of the blows, which were so rapid that it was almost impossible to see anything. One spectator remarked in surprise that he could only hear the clinking of swords but could not understand what was happening in front of his eyes. Suddenly Lo threw a blow from which Al was forced to retreat, overwhelmed by the power of the enemy. Seizing the moment, he tried to end the fight with a straight punch. But suddenly his attention was drawn to something else. At that instant, Eddie seized the opportunity and launched a swift attack, firing several arrows. But Lo showed incredible skill, fending off all the arrows with astonishing speed. They flew into the bleachers. That shocked the audience. Those watching were increasingly amazed at how Lo was handling the attacks of 2 of the world's strongest fighters. Al and Eddie exchanged a few words. Al said he was sure Lo was a very high-ranking swordsman, and Eddie admitted he had never seen such a fighter. For the first time in the duel, Lo spoke, calmly asking what their other ranks were. Eddie answered that he was ranked 402nd among archers, and Al said he was 753rd among mercenaries. Lo said in a calm, confident tone that it was now clear to him. A mysterious and incredibly powerful energy began to envelop Lo and stated that if he defeated them both, he would be in the top 1,000 of the top rankings. A tremendous power emanated from him and everyone could feel its overwhelming might. Eddie was stunned by this energy, surprise and shock reflected on his face. Al was shocked and excited as well, pondering how this person could suddenly acquire such an aura. Luck looked at Lo in amazement as the prana became visible to the naked eye. Immediately, Eddie Markman put a bow on Lo's and firmly stated that ratings are not just a profession. He added that although he is 402nd among archers, he is also ranked as the 78th ranked shooting specialist. Eddie fired an arrow, but in a split second Lo dodged it and lunged at Eddie, knocking him down with one punch and knocking him out. Lo then turned to Aldarkis, who, seeing his partner fall, quickly prepared to fight. Al looked at Lo with concern and bewilderment because of his strange power. The fear of such power read on his face. Both got into a fighting stance for the final clash to the tense noise of the crowd. They exchanged sharp, determined glances. It was clear from Lo's hard stare how strong he was. And Al looked stunned. Lo rushed forward with incredible speed, dashed past Al and delivered a swift blow that nearly felled him. At the last moment, the mercenary cried out asking Lo to stop. After the stop, Al announced that he was surrendering, dropped his weapon, and explained that he could not allow injuries. He had a job to do. Al added that it would be bad if he was unconscious like Eddie. And Lo seemed to be silently analyzing his opponent's condition. Al caught a glimpse of Lo's moving hand. And I was worried that this guy was a monster. Al continued to ponder with obvious amazement, wondering about this young man's true nature. Meanwhile, onlookers expressed admiration and utter defeat at the strength of Lo, who handled 2 top-ranked fighters by himself. The Onion was shocked. The bureau clerk announced in a clear voice the end of the bout and the winner, contestant number 53, Lo. Suddenly, the younger female employee of the confession rushed away, ignoring the call of a colleague, leaving her wondering where she was rushing off to. She quickly made her way to a room with advanced equipment and computers, and excitedly began searching for GH in the exclusive recognizer database. Finally, a coworker found Lo's records. His full name is Lo Tuli, age 17, but no previous registration or rating. She was deeply surprised that a man with such skills knew nothing about their bureau and figured he must be from a very remote area. Luck made sure he had no criminal record or ties to task forces, which added to her amazement and joy. A wide smile and indescribable joy stretched across her face as she gleefully asked, "Where has this talent been hiding all this time?" She hurried to the reception room and, walking down the corridor, rushed toward Lo, calling out loudly, "Lo Tali." Finally, a junior female employee entered the room and enthusiastically offered to be his exclusive agent. But she was amazed. There was a crowd gathered around Lo and everyone was making the same suggestions to him. She was shocked by what she saw and deeply upset that she was only a step too late. Everyone had already managed to offer their services before her. Luck resented the others' haste, believing that they should have checked Lo's identity first before offering him cooperation. Suddenly, Lo was surprised and innocently asked what an exclusive agent meant. Immediately, a junior staff member shouted and intervened, assuring Lo that she would explain everything in detail now. She began a thorough explanation by saying that an agent is a person assigned to monitor his client's rating. The staff member clarified that they usually have to wait until they are evaluated at the main office to update the rating. But with an exclusive agent, the adventurer can update the rating instantly, anytime and anywhere, with no waiting. She went on to passionately explain that this is especially valuable for adventurers who travel the world frequently. The younger female employee slipped her hands into her pockets and pulled out a device called a runctal, explaining that it was a unique tool for agents to record rank. She held out the device to Lo, noting that if he wanted to climb the ranks quickly and efficiently, he needed an exclusive agent like her. Lo thought for a moment, seriously considering the suggestion, then said in a calm tone that he only had one condition. Lo looked around at everyone and clearly stated that he was willing to hire any exclusive agent who could help him get into the top 10 rankings. A moment of astonishment spread among the observers after Lo's unexpected and difficult demand. People began to whisper, noting that the top 10 included powers beyond compare. Some in the crowd expressed concern about Lo's request, pointing out that even with his outstanding ability, it's nearly impossible to get into the top 10. Despite this, Lo remained silent without adding a word, and continued to look forward with obvious confidence and determination. At that moment, the junior staffer looked at him and noticed how Lo quietly stepped back without picking anyone out. She tore after him, yelling loudly and calling for him to stop and wait. The employee quickly left the bureau. She hurried to catch up with Lo, who was heading for the exit of the building. When she finally managed to catch up with him, she called his name loudly, asking him to stop. Bao, panting, asked why does this particular hero want to be in the top 10 ranking? But he cut off her question and said it was none of her business. Then the Onion asked her to make it her business. She excitedly stood up and began her speech about wanting to become his personal agent of recognition. It is with her help that the protagonist will be able to reach the top 10 in the rankings. But Lo replied calmly that he didn't want to put the child in danger, which surprised the employee, who got mad and said she wasn't a child but a recognizer first and foremost. Lo answered her firmly and decisively that even if she wasn't a child, he had no intention of hiring anyone. He continued, looking quietly into the horizon, adding that he didn't want to drag others into what he himself was doing. But the employee wouldn't give up, insisting again with even more confidence that she had a job to complete at any cost. She spoke with even more fervor, explaining to Lo that she had a strong reason for risking her life. And that's why she wants to work with him and form an alliance. They stood silently facing each other, surveying the city, and Lo listened intently to her words. The junior, Lo, revealed her main reason, stating that she has a purpose and a mission that she intends to fulfill no matter what. In that moment, Lo remembered his own purpose for coming here and the promise he had made a year ago. Hearing this, Lo replied very quietly, looking her straight in the eye, that he, too, had business to complete, no matter what. They stood face to face in direct confrontation, and the city around them was bathed in golden sunlight. The coworker excitedly extended her hand to Lo, assuring her that she could handle it. Lo, a former senior at the time, said she would elevate him to the top of the rankings and gave her name as the Onion of Media. Lo said his name too, though she already knew it, and held out his hand as well. Finally, they shook hands against the setting sun, marking the official beginning of their union. The scene shifted to a house that the junior staffer rented, where she greeted Lo warmly, excitedly asking if he liked the place. The employee enthusiastically explained that the lease was only for a few days and suggested Lo's use it as a temporary base. Lo politely thanked her for her labors, calling her very capable, but she embarrassedly replied that it wasn't that important. It turned out that GH had expressed doubts about her services, offering a probationary period of a week instead, which made her very angry. Media dramatically and passionately assured him that she would prove her full competence in just 1 week, and even mockingly imitated his manner of speech. Lo almost smiled and simply said he hoped so. Media has noticed that, despite the power and seriousness of Lo's fighting, he is very absent-minded in everyday life. How often is he told that? Suddenly, the exam results came out, and the employee pulled out a rank-tell device, enthusiastically announcing to Lo that his results were ready. Totals showed that Lo Toli's original ranking as an adventurer was 2,728. The Onion was surprised and said that this was a very good rank obtained immediately after registration. Lo thought he should be in the triple-digit range. 2 of the exam participants already had high ratings. Eddie was ranked 402nd among shooters and All was ranked 753rd among mercenaries. Media explained that the adventurer rankings are the most competitive of all the ranks, making high rankings extremely difficult, and it's not just about strength. She then showed Lo the details of his rankings, pointing out that he had another 58 rank of swordsman, which was an exceptional result. A coworker unequivocally confirmed that this number reflects peak talent according to the Recognition Bureau. Lo then asked if Ola and Eddie had other ratings. Media confirmed and brought out their different classifications. She sounded off on Alya Darkus rankings: Mercenaries 753, Swordsman 521, Special Purge 209, Investigators 2,831, and Trusted Leaders 86. She also listed Eddie Markman's rankings: Shooters 420, Snipers 781, Scouts 2,111, and an impressive 19th place in mushroom farming. Media explained that having multiple ratings is possible, but it increases the workload and responsibility. But Lo immediately and firmly replied that he didn't want any extra work, and the employee smiled, saying she was beginning to understand his character a little better. A coworker outlined his main goal, clearly stating that he wanted to get into the top 10 of the adventurer rankings as quickly and as short as possible. She then excitedly pointed upward, noting that she assumed his ultimate goal was to get to Heaven Island. Lo continued to listen intently to her silently and earnestly without denying what she had said. He asked in surprise how she knew that, and she explained that it was the only privilege of the top 10. Media then asked if he would tell her the reason for the hit after the probationary period, and Lo agreed. She replied that she too would share her circumstances when her probation was over. Added that it would be fair to exchange details, though she noted that her situation is somewhat complex and difficult to explain to a newcomer to the world of ratings. A serious and mysterious expression appeared on her face as she quietly said that she was pursuing rank darkness. When Lo asked what she had just said, she quickly waved her hand, smiled, and said it didn't matter. She instantly changed the subject and asked how he got such power, especially his impressive sword wielding. Luo simply replied that he had become the apprentice of a knight named Adel a year ago, which caused her to cry out in shock at the utterance of that name. She grabbed him in bewilderment, asking if he was Adel, knight number 1 and the strongest knight of mankind, to which Lo calmly replied that he was. She was amazed at his calm response, and explained how famous Adel was, noting that he never taught anyone. And rumor has it he planned to choose a successor of rank 1 from the young knights of the next generation. Emidia was still ecstatic about Lo becoming Adel's successor and trembled, saying that the other knights would faint if they found out. Lo then quietly and simply asked if Adel is really that amazing, and the female employee confirmed that he is the number 1 knight and the strongest in the entire world. She gradually noticed that he had managed to stab Adel with his sword, which caused the staff member to cry out in disbelief. Such a thing was impossible. Finally, she grabbed her device and checked Lo's data again, making sure Tuli was a brand new last name in the database and seriously thinking about it again. Lo recalled a long-ago conversation with Adel, when he asked him about the meaning of the last name and realized then that the concept was unfamiliar to him. Adel told him that if he really wanted to get to Heavenly Island by the shortest way, let him use the name Luo Tuli, warning that it can carry great risks but provide important clues. Lo pondered this, and said he understood and would use the name. The scene returned to the present where a female coworker curiously asked Lo if Tuli was an alias. But Lo answered firmly, confirming that it was not an alias. Tuli was the last name of his beloved family. A warm smile appeared on Emidia's face and she thanked him for the explanation. She then offered to take a break and told Lo that her agent duties were done for the day. Emidia began to remove her hat, saying she would soon feel relief. Lo was surprised to see this, and exclaimed that he had not expected such a thing. Then, clearly embarrassed, he awkwardly asked, "She's been a girl this whole time?" The coworker shouted in frustration and asked, with deep embarrassment, if he just realized it now, to which Lo calmly replied sorry. The employee looked extremely annoyed by Lo's calmness, drilling him with a look of anger and annoyance. Then she roared in frustration, wondering if sorry was all he could say after such a shocking revelation. The next morning began with a peaceful picture of the city and its busy streets. Emidia was sitting in the room reading the newspaper. Being calm and centered, Lo appeared coming down from the top floor, and a female employee greeted him with a smile, noticing that he was awake early. Lo mumbled that he was just going to get some water. As he came closer and saw her clearly, he faltered slightly and said quietly that it was nothing important. They greeted each other politely, after which Emidia suggested they have breakfast together. She put her hat back on, saying that the road ahead would be a long one, but today is the first step in their big journey. She stated with great enthusiasm that it was time to do some strategic planning on how Lo's could break into the top 10 adventurer rankings. The scene changed to a modest restaurant in town where Emidia explained to Lo that the primary way to increase an adventurer's rank is through exploratory or exploration achievements in new lands. She clarified that these missions could be voluntary but advised starting with formal assignments. Lo agreed and listened intently as he ate his breakfast while she told him that many people needed the powers of adventurers and gave missions. When she pulled out the ranktel device, he could easily access those missions with her help. Lo noted that it was convenient and the female employee smiled, saying he was free to use it if he appointed her as his agent. As they continued to eat together, Lo asked with interest if there were any missions that would quickly raise his rating. She replied that it is enough to choose high-difficulty missions as they have the strongest impact on rankings. Lo immediately decided to pick the hardest mission on the list. To find a hidden treasure inside the flooded Temple of Takarma, a dangerous area ranked 7th on the list of dangerous places. But Emidia loudly objected to his choice, insisting that the mission was impossible and deeply dangerous for him at this stage. Despite her adamant protest, Lo stood firm and said he wouldn't know his limits until he tried it. However, Emidia reiterated that this mission was beyond him, and that he might die before he could raise his rank. Lo looked at her with unflinching determination and asked her to give him a chance, explaining that Heavenly Island ranked first in terms of danger. Which means we can't back down now. Emidia felt a lot of pressure and thought to herself that he was incredibly stubborn and that she would have to convince him by any means necessary. At this moment, a new person suddenly appeared. Emidia looked in his direction and was clearly shocked. She addressed him as Mr. Laud, and he greeted her with a smile, saying it had been a long time since they'd seen each other. Lo asked the employee who the man was, and she quickly introduced him as Lord Blaward. Emidia explained that Lord is a very powerful individual, ranked 11th among adventurers. Lo was clearly surprised to hear this. And immediately I remembered Adol's words about all the adventurers in the upper ranks being real monsters in terms of strength. Lo felt that the Lord standing before him was indeed one of the monsters Adol had spoken of. He thought to himself that if Lord was in 11th place, he was only one step away from the right to enter the island of the gods. At this moment, Emidia smiled with great enthusiasm and told Lord that his arrival was the perfect time, and then suddenly asked him for a favor. She then excitedly yelled at Lord to beat Lo. The stage changed to a dueling arena, where Lord stood in front of Lo apologizing for the delay. Lord said he wasn't expecting a duel, so he borrowed a weapon from someone else, noting that it was light and suitable for combat. Lo introduced himself seriously and formally, stating that his name was Lo Tuli. Lord smiled and said that there was no need for formality among adventurers. One could speak freely and at ease. He added that he knows the employee well, as she used to update his rating, and praised her outstanding skills. He explained that Emidia has great knowledge, fervor, and thoroughness in her work, qualities that set her apart from other agents. He also noted that since the request came from such a diligent employee, he was willing to help in any way he could. Lord prepared to teach the stubborn newcomer a lesson, adding with a smile that the onion clearly cared for him. Lo got into a stance and immediately sensed how powerful Lord was just by looking at him. The strongest aura of energy emanated from Lord, and Lo felt that he would be pierced if he tried to attack carelessly. At this point, the female employee shouted to Lo with great excitement that this is the perfect chance to realize how big the world he lives in is. Lo was silent for a moment, thinking that if this is a test of the size of the world, he's definitely up for the challenge. Lo's energy suddenly exploded around him, spreading outward, and he proclaimed aloud that he knew how vast and powerful the world was. Facing off were Lo Tali, rated 2728, and Lord Blaward, rated 11. In a serious and decisive fight before the duel, employee Emidia raised her hand with great excitement and loudly announced the start of the match. They tore at each other with great speed, and their weapons clashed powerfully, causing a flurry of sparks and the release of bursts of energy from the furious collision. Luo moved with incredible speed, delivering a powerful blow with his sword, now charged with prana energy, which led to a crushing chopping blow that still didn't hit Lod's face. Lod was deeply surprised as he watched Lo's abilities, and in his mind he analyzed how Lo channeled prana energy into both his sword and shield during his attacks, and also noticed that he uses energy to amplify his movements on an extraordinary level. He continued to watch the sword technique of the sword Lo and realized that it was familiar to him, convincing himself that it couldn't possibly be the secret style of a great knight that is only passed down to one person per generation. While Lod was deep in thought, Lo seized the moment and moved forward, stating firmly that there was no time to think in battle. They were once again confronted by a tremendous force, and Lod seemed more relaxed this time, commenting calmly, while Lo kept pushing him. They exchanged a series of rapid successive attacks amidst the noise and chaos of battle, and their blows collided with such power that small bursts of energy erupted around them. Lod stepped back slightly, looking at Lo's overwhelming energy and noting that Lo's amount of prana surpassed even his own. And there was a strange shimmering around him as well. Lod bluntly asked Lo what race he was, because of the strange energy they carried. And Lo looked visibly puzzled, wonderingly asking what he meant by the word race. Lod replied seriously that pretending ignorance would not help, and added that you don't acquire such energy later in life, you have to be born with it. Seeing that Lo didn't want to talk, Lod indifferently stated, which would force him to unleash his abilities in battle, and began preparing a powerful attack with his spear. Then he asked Lo if he could use the techniques, which confused Lo and made him wonder what the term even meant. Lod began to cast his special spell, and a huge energy began to rise around him. A huge energy exploded around Lod, forming a massive golden aura, which left Lo in unseen shock watching the stunning display of Lod's strength. Lod continued his powerful chanting, reciting new words of the ritual, which caused a large number of glowing sharp spears to appear around him. Lod was preparing for a crushing attack. He looked at Lo and said confidently that he had better use his own spells. Laud continued with a serious intonation, saying to Lo, that he'll die if he doesn't use his spell now. They stood on the battlefield, surrounded by an intense energy that filled the space with anticipation and heavy expectation. Laud looked at Lo with deep concentration, waiting for his opponent's reaction. Lo's face clearly betrayed tension and anxiety. As he watched the powerful blow Laud was about to deliver to him, Laud pointed his spear at Lo with force, and golden energy began to gather around him in anticipation of the attack. A huge wave of energy surged out of him in a dense hail of glowing spears flying towards Luo, and overwhelming him with the force of the onslaught. Lo began to move with incredible speed, trying to dodge the spears showering down on him with incredible power. Despite his attempts to dodge, it was clear that Lo was wounded, and Laud calmly recognized that a normal sword would not be able to repel such a spell. With a light touch of your fingers, Laud summoned more spears, which tore towards Lo with great speed and force. Lo continued to dodge, using incredibly agile and swift movements to avoid the relentless spears. After the attack ended, Lo stopped, catching his breath, panting slightly, but his face remained deeply focused. Lo's thoughts returned to training with his mentor Adel, who had once told him that he was still weak in prana control, and added that once Lo got used to controlling prana, he would gradually be able to master the techniques. At that moment, Luo asked in surprise what kind of techniques he would be able to master. Adel advised careful observation and said he would start by teaching the simplest technique. Adel then demonstrated a basic technique called Lightning Blade in front of Lo, who showed tremendous strength and blinding speed. Lo decided to use this very technique against Laud. Glittered his eyes, releasing a powerful stream of green prana, rushing towards the enemy with incredible speed. Laud was completely shocked by the speed and power of the technique released by Lo, and tried his best to fend her off. Despite Laud's efforts to defend himself, Lo continued his offensive with tremendous force, attacking him in close combat. At this moment, Laud used another extremely powerful spell, summoning another great multitude of glowing spears around him. This led to another furious clash as their energy techniques converged in a powerful explosion. Laud was stunned by the lightning-fast kick that Lo executed, barely visible to the eye. Although the attack was incredibly fast, Laud quickly came to his senses and sensed the seriousness of the situation. He threw himself into a lightning-fast counterattack, skillfully swinging his spear towards Lo, who was amazed by Laud's incredible reaction and power. When Laud's powerful and swift attack continued, it ended in a furious collision, which sent Lo crashing to the ground. Despite Lo's downfall, Laud commented admiringly on the young fighter's performance, noting that his strength is worthy of recognition. However, Laud added firmly, motioning with his fingers that despite Lo's efforts, the wall in front of him was still too high. He then launched his next attack, surrounding the entire area with golden energy spears and completely locking Lo in on all sides. Lo froze in shock, unable to move, a look of surprise on the girl's face. At this moment, Laud cast a penetrating gaze at Lo, telling him to never underestimate the rank of an adventurer. Without hesitation, Laud released golden spears towards Luo, who was unable to do anything to counter the devastating attack. A slight look of annoyance flashed across Lo's face, as if he didn't quite like being in this situation. The attack caused a massive explosion that collapsed the arena floor, raising debris and dust into the air. After the attack was over, Lo lay unconscious in the center of a large crater, clearly overwhelmed by the force of the blow. Laud looked down at his opponent, who was still lying motionless. The screen in the battle arena unequivocally declared Laud Bloward, ranked 11th in the adventurer rankings, as the winner. After the match was over, Laud smiled and asked Lo if she was satisfied. She continued, noting that Lo now had a better understanding of the harsh reality of the situation. But Laud calmly remarked that she was great at making words sound good. Laud looked at her thoughtfully and asked whether she really believed that Lo could eventually defeat him. Emilia quietly replied that she just thought it was possible. Laud concluded that her belief was due to the fact that Lo was a disciple of the great knight Adel. He confirmed that he recognized Lo's identity the moment he saw his lightning-fast sword movement, a technique from the secret style of Holy Blade. He noted that the Blade Saint style is considered the strongest of all, and is usually only passed down from generation to generation among knights. Laud added that for Lo, who possesses the technique, being in the rank of adventurer rather than knight, could be perceived as an insult to knights. Suddenly Emilia exclaimed with great concern that she must now prevent Lo from meeting the knights, and Laud agreed. Laud suggested that the situation would be easier if Lo registered as a knight, which could help avoid a lot of problems. Emilia looked deeply concerned, realizing that, with his purpose and fortitude, it's impossible. She went on to explain that the real reason for her belief in Luo's strength, besides the fact that he was a disciple, was that Lo had told her how he had managed to strike a successful blow at Adel himself. Laud was deeply surprised and reacted with obvious disbelief, saying that it was impossible, especially given Lo's current skill level. Emilia agreed and admitted that she thought the same thing at first, but added that Lo didn't seem like someone who would lie about something like that. Laud seemed thoughtful and whispered to himself that although the style of Blade Saint was a surprise, he was even more struck by the special flicker of energy that Lo used, suggestive of a deep secret. Suddenly Emilia turned to Laud with interest, and Laud told her bluntly that Lo was also proficient in spell techniques. He calmly admitted that if Lo had actually used those spells in battle, Laud might have lost the match. After a while, Lo has a vision with some girl. She turns to him, whistling some pleasant tune. Suddenly she moves closer and almost touches his face. Grandmother's sharp cry interrupts the whistling. She asks angrily what he's humming about, calling it nonsense. She blames the poems for their confinement. These lines are the reason why it is impossible to go out. They are forbidden to be spoken. The girl looked after her grandmother in frustration and silence. She quietly apologizes to Lo, and she finishes what she started by putting her hand right on his face. The protagonist's eyes finally open. Lo comes to his senses in an unfamiliar place. His gaze wanders. A woman's voice notices the awakening, calling it the Bureau's infirmary. Lo's companion reports that he slept all day in this Bureau infirmary. The guy is flabbergasted, questioning if it's really been 24 hours. The Onion says it's straight off. The doctor diagnosed severe mental fatigue. The interlocutor confesses ignorance of his burden. However, she directly points out that the guy is clearly in too much of a hurry, not sparing himself. Suddenly Lu remembers what turned him off, his duel with Laud and his spears. After a pause, Lo agrees with her remarks and precautions. At first, the girl looks at him silently, and then turns to Lo, emphasizing the importance of the upcoming conversation. She asks if he is familiar with the concept of spells. Lo says he doesn't know. Spells are described as a unique method of controlling prana, available only to a select few races. Many of the strongest rankers have this ability. A question was raised as to whether Laud belonged to such races. The answer is yes, he is a warrior of the Blowerword, a hunting tribe from the southern swamps. The reason spells are unique is because of their transmission. Knowledge is preserved by tribes orally, often in verse from generation to generation. Such techniques are called spells. They are based on genetics, which makes mastering them as an adult extremely rare and difficult. Lo is trying to realize why he is being told this. The interlocutor relays Lo's words to Lo. In his opinion, the guy can use spells and techniques too. The girl addresses Lo with a direct question. She wants to know if he has the slightest idea or guess about his abilities. Lo hesitates, and the image of the girl from the dream pops into his head again. After a short pause, Lo answers in the affirmative. His companion reacts enthusiastically to his words, expressing approval. The girl fervently declares the incredible value of spells to the rancher. Her confidence in this fact is only strengthened now. With enthusiasm, she declares Lo's potential to become a top ranker. Then she presents the perfect assignment for him. The aforementioned assignment is an investigation in the Azaban forest. The task includes an environmental survey of a forest that had been designated a 48th ranked hazardous area 2 months earlier. Lo clarifies the nature of the quest. The boy asks if his work will be limited to studying animals and other forest inhabitants. The interviewee recognizes this as part of the job but immediately reports a disturbing trend, the increasing disappearances of people of various ranks there. Girl predicts a dramatic rise in Lo's rank with success. She estimates that he will easily climb 200 positions, but the risks are enormous. Lo gets to his feet and decisively accepts the proposed quest in the Azaban forest, announcing his agreement to take on the task. The guy turns to his interlocutor, noting that she proposed the quest, believing in his powers. She confidently confirms it. The design of the quest begins immediately. A girl warns of the prohibitions in the Azaban forest, protected animals, and restricted areas. The interlocutor reassures Lo with her presence, but insists on caution. The boy asks about the consequences of violations. Violation of the rules threatens a drop in rank. Adventurer reputation suffers from quest failures or damage to the ecosystem. The girl emphasizes an adventurer's rank is his reliability. Lo consciously takes this information to heart. The quest is complete. The interlocutor joyfully announces this as the beginning of a new phase in Lo's career as an adventurer. She describes the quest as a powerful first step in Lo's meteoric rise up the ladder of ranks among adventurers. The girl calls for a joint effort, expressing determination and support in the difficult investigation ahead. And the guy is relieved to agree. The frame switches to the strange forest, and two people in the middle of it. One character states the impossibility of changing what he has already seen by grabbing the other by the neck. Another character asks a question about another murder. The first character dismissively remarks the unimportance of the fate of low-ranked rankers. Killer stares up at the cage with a small animal, and he kicks it as hard as he can. The speaker expresses a sense of stupidity from trying to honestly raise his rank while becoming frustrated with the system. Here's the pet peeve. A character is looking at a unicorn. He expects to quickly enter the top 1,000 ranks after selling the creature's horn. The unicorn is shocked at the thought. An important truth is spoken: martial prowess alone is not enough to rise in the adventurer rankings. A new character is introduced, Rosso Cruel, the 7th-ranked smuggler. He declares his destiny to help those suffering from injustice. The character firmly states his refusal to leave the lucrative hunting ground, showing determination and self-interest. An ambitious goal to achieve a place in the top 100 is spoken, expressing confidence in success. The bastard's name is Dalkan Iris, and he's a level 627 adventurer.